So, Alyssa, we have Jimmy on the phone. Carla said that she was going to call in, and Tasha's excused, but she said that she might try to call in. So far, only Jimmy's on the phone.
Okay.
And since 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, you do. Hello?
Hi, it's Carla.
Hey, Carla. We're just now getting started.
Oh, good, good, good.
All right, we're ready when you're ready.
All right, let's call to order. I gotta tell you, I don't really remember all the steps, so roll call.
Yeah,
We've
so,
done that, right?
yep. You should have a sign-in sheet going around. Make sure that you get that signed in. But since we have Carla and Jimmy on the phone, so we have Carla and Jimmy on the phone. Lindsay's here. Alyssa is sharing the meeting. Lindy is here. Jonathan's here. Jed is here. And Tasha is excused. So Jimmy and Carla, thanks for joining us on the phone. Appreciate it.
Did anybody have anything they wanted to add to the agenda or any comments on that? All right, I guess, can I get a motion to approve it?
Move to approve.
Second?
All right. Any changes? Okay. So then we move on to the assembly.
Yep. Actually, I think I'll just share with the assembly, and maybe Desiree might want to jump in, but just to let the BAC know, I've been in email traffic with Felix, who's the chair of the assembly, and he asked that both Forrest Dunbar and Austin Quinn Davidson get emailed, and so I think what he's going to do is have one of those people be attending the meeting, most likely Austin, but since Forrest chairs the Budget and Finance Committee, I think he may be here as well. But let you guys know what's going on in the Assembly's world related to your world. The spending limit proposal that you guys proposed, aligning with the tax cap, that was on the Assembly's agenda for the 24th. They didn't get to it, so it got continued until the 8th, so I suspect that they'll act on that on the 8th. That's one thing in their House. They'll continue to look at the stormwater utility, but the 3 actions that they did is, in previous actions, they created the utility. At the last meeting, they put the money in to fund the utility. They also created a commission, and so they have an additional work session or action to talk about, I think, the duties of the commission. And then there was some conversation, a lot of conversation about lease rates, or about knowing what the rates are before they establish the utility. And the administration made the point is we don't know what the rates are because we don't know the service area and we don't know the level of service. Until we figure that out, we can't tell you what the rates are. So they've been just talking about that. The other big thing in their world related to you is the budget. They're going to get the budget on, we gave it to the clerk yesterday, and I'm going to talk about that a little bit today. So their public hearing will get introduced on the 8th. And I think the last thing I want to mention with the Assembly is they have a work session following the work session that we are going to, our office will be giving the Assembly a work session on the budget Friday at 2. Friday at 3, they have a follow-up work session to talk about alternative revenue streams in the future. So I know this is something that the Budget Advisory Commission has been interested in, and so the Assembly asked us to put together some information about alternative revenue sources. It's not something the administration is promoting. They ask us to put together information about revenue options, the pros, the cons, and the amount and the timing. So that will be shared with them tomorrow at 3 o'clock. That's an hour and a half. So your schedule's available. Just make you aware. And if it's not, obviously the information will be available to you and it's recorded. So that's what's going on in the Assembly world, unless Desiree has anything that she wants to add.
Just to follow up, Austin will be here in November, Forrest will be here in December. You don't get anybody today because they're in Matsu right now doing a joint meeting with Matsu Borough, but they are on track to be switching on and off Austin and Forrest and attending this meeting.
That's what's going on, as much as I know it's in the Assembly related to budget.
And then school district.
Madam Chair, school district, we're still closing out last year for preparing our financial statements. That's getting close to done. Auditors are there on site this week. For the current year, our OASIS counts calculate our ADM for our funding. That goes on the month of October for the first 20 days in October. Preliminary looks at our total ADMs about where we projected, so that's good news. Our intensive needs students count is up by about 50, so in that range is last year we had a little under 950 kids that were identified as intensive needs, and now we're a little over 1,000. So that number continues to grow, so we get the revenue for it, but still have the challenges of educating those students. The board has also asked for a preliminary look at next year's budget deficit, which we gave them a couple weeks ago. Preliminarily, I mean, this is kind of back down below sketching, so we really haven't gone through all our contracts and all our utility projections, but got back with the envelope math for next year's deficit. We're targeting about $25 to $30 million with just flat funding. The main drivers are we expect to lose $10.5 million of one-time funding from the state plus the local match, and about 10 to 12 million in just normal inflationary costs on almost a $600 million budget, about 2% interest or inflation on there, and then we use $5 million of fund balance this year to offset costs. Looking forward, generally our projections don't include that. The board will authorize that if we have it. So that could further reduce that deficit. That's 25 to 30 million lower. And then estimating about 300 fewer students would be about another $3 million deficit. So that's where we kind of get to the 25 to 30 million, but really that's just the very, very rough preliminary look at it that the board has asked for. So we need to start, given the magnitude of the cuts that may be coming, the board wants to start discussing that out in the community earlier than usual this year. But that's really what the school district's got going. Do you have any questions?
Any questions? Those I didn't ask if anybody had any questions for Lance.
If anyone has any questions for Lance, feel free to jump in.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. We'll move on to the budget.
Okay. So what I wanted to do with the Budget Advisory Commission today is give you a preview of a presentation that I want to give, or that I'm going to give to the Assembly tomorrow at 2 o'clock. They have a work session scheduled to look at an overview of the 2020 budgets, all three of them. Ginny and Carla, Lila should have sent you a copy of the presentation. Hopefully that you've received it so you can take a look at it. Any chance you got it?
Yes, I have it.
Okay. I just asked you this. It is a draft, and until the Assembly gets a chance to take a look at this thing, the real presentation will be ready to share tomorrow. So I'm just so that you guys can follow along. I just ask you to kind of keep it at this draft stage right now, and then when it's done, it's done. But this is kind of our working piece. Is that okay?
Yeah, well, for $1 and a cookie.
Okay, I'm good for both. What kind of cookie?
Thank you. Chocolate chip.
I got it. Chocolate chip cookie. Okay.
Noted.
All right. So what I would like to do is I'm going to run through this thing. You guys have comments or questions? It's super high level. Following the presentation that I'm going to give tomorrow, we have already got a work session scheduled with the Assembly by department on the 18th and the 25th. That's Lila to send around that schedule to you so you guys have some interest on your Fridays, or let me know. So, can you guys see that okay? You see that all right? All right. So, looking at the environment on where the budget environment that we started with. So we start our budget process in June of every year, and so a lot was going on in June. A lot was going on with what's going on with the state impacts and some of the uncertainties going on there. As it relates to the state's budget and our budget, the state's budget, the amount of revenue impact directly onto our municipal revenue is pretty small. It's really only related to a couple programs and revenue sharing. But what does impact us indirectly are the things that the state is not supporting, primarily in social services and community seniors, other local resources, when those programs aren't there, they strain, or they come to the municipality. So the straining on our resources is compounded. It's mostly in the health department, the parks department, the fire department, and the police department. And so those things, we feel those stresses. As it relates to revenue sharing, we know that this year we received $6 million in revenue sharing. We budgeted 6, we received 4.5. And the revenue sharing is based on the amount that we received is based on a formula in which the state generates, and we get a proportional split of that. So that number has gone from tens of millions of dollars down to 4. And next year, and for the 2020 budget, we are projecting the amount that we're going to get next year is the same amount we're going to get this year, but it's subject to change. State grants supporting other projects and programs, the amount of state grants coming to capital work as it relates to our capital program is pretty much non-existent at this point. And so one of the things that when you look at the amount of investment we're making in our bond program, it is going up a little bit every single year. It's about like $3 to $5 million that gets ratcheted up, and it's mostly in roads and in facilities. Our parks has pretty much been the same, but most of the grants have been in buildings and roads, and so that stuff is literally going away. The only basically 2 grants that we received in the last 4 years has been for the port, and then we received some operating grants to keep up the troopers on turning an arm for 1 year. And so we got a little bit of that money left over, but that's dwindling quickly. The other thing that we've done in 2020 is the way we do a budget is through the philosophy and the methodology we take is a continuation process. We don't do zero-based budgeting. We don't necessarily do direct performance-based budgeting. What we do is a continuation. What that means is we take $1 that costs for the budget as it relates to labor and medical, and we basically apply the adjustments to bargaining units. So if the Budget Advisory Commission is a member of a bargaining unit and your bargaining unit says that you're going to get a 1% raise next year, we calculate that in. It's automatic. It's not something that we negotiate. But what we did different this year is that than in the past is that if you had a responsibility for building leases and your lease rates went up, or you had a contract with a private vendor to do animal control or medical investment, we didn't do those continuations. We basically we didn't add that into a continuation budget in previous years. This year we did. And we'll talk a little bit about why and how we did that. So those are some of the big changes. This is not going to be a surprise, but the administration is really still focused on the top 2 in public safety and homelessness and housing, and I'll talk a little bit about each one of those. And then the operations stability. As a point in time, since 2018, we've taken at least 40 positions out of general government that were not related to public safety, police and fire. And that equated to about $15 million that basically we reprogrammed inside the budget and allocated that to public safety so that we could get police and fire up to and to support public safety. But in this budget, we have some adjustments, but you will not see any significant reductions in other general government. Okay. So what we have here. So this is the commitments that we have when we go to do continuation. When I talked about the continuation, just the labor, the salaries, and the benefits from 19 to 20 is $6.6 million. So that's a cost directly to us to add in. We talked about the non-labor. So the leases, which is primarily a significant amount of that $3 million, professional service contracts. The health department has a contractor for animal control. The police department and development services has a contract for towing. All of those kinds of things are incorporated into this as a continuation. Our debt service, when we look at the amount of debt that we paid in 19 and the amount that we are going to issue and pay in 20, it's actually going to be less. And it's a combination of 2 things. The amount of debt that we are actually are retiring in 20 is about, it's less, and so that's primarily the primary part of that. A little bit of refinancing has helped them in there. So our budget is made up of hundreds of different types of revenue sources. Some of it small, some of it pretty significant. So I'm looking at the 2020 revenue changes, Carla and Jimmy. But to highlight some of the things that are significant that I want to highlight here. So Medicaid transports. When we built 19, we were anticipating about $2.5 million. When we built 19 modified, we basically made an adjustment. When we built the budget last year, we were on an anticipated schedule that the state would release a notice that would allow us to start reimbursing those costs. By April of that year, we found out that the state was not going to do that in time for us to recover that money in 19, so we took it out. Now, the state did issue that notice in August of this year. So we know that we're going to recoup the money next year. So that's why we put it back in. That make sense? Okay. Contributions to the trust. In this case, when we sold, for those members who might not be familiar, we used to own a phone company. We sold the phone company. We created a trust. When we created that trust, we draw revenue off of that trust at about 4%. It's about $6 million based on the amount that we have in the trust. This scenario, we are making the assumption that ML&P will sell in 2020. I'm going to tell you it's going to be in April, July, or whatever it will be. But when it does sell, we're going to do two things. We know we're going to do two things. One of them is we're going to pay their debt. And the other is, right now, we're going to put more money into the trust. When we put more money into the trust, we're going to gain more money in the interest out of the trust. That's a pretty conservative number, that $2.9 million, but that's what that is. So that would be additional revenue based on the sale that we put into the trust and get the return. So that's what that's about.
So does the debt service not incorporate that debt that you're paying off in?
So
you're anticipating the revenue, but not the...
we expect we're going to pay the debt off, all together separate. And then and once we pay the debt off, which is about $500 million, we're going to have another $300 million or more, or about that. We're going to take a big portion of that and put that into the trust. There's two things that are important, because we have two things we can do with the money, and what we told the voters. We told them that we were going to put it in the trust and we're going to pay off debt. Right now, it makes more sense to put the money in the trust because the return on the trust is
So
more than paying off the debt.
But I think, Lance, the way I interpreted Andy's question is that you had a prior line on a prior slide about debt service.
Yes.
Right. That's municipal debt service, not ML&P
No,
debt service?
That $3 million is only GO debt. It's only
Right.
municipal debt, not ML&P
debt.
That's a good point. That's exactly right. Because when I know there will be more conversations after the sale about whether or not we continue to put that amount of money in the trust, or whether or not we pay off other debt. But for the proposed budget, this is the assumption that we are making. In the dividends, we have an increase in the dividends. Last year, AWWU, particularly on the AWWU, is a water and a wastewater utility. Both of them are regulated separately. The water utility is in a fiscal situation where they can actually pay a dividend next year, about 1.6. And solid waste will pay us about $600,000.
So when you actually are saying AWU there,
it's the water utility.
It's the water utility
of
of
AWWU.
the AWWU.
Yeah.
And so what's the acronym for the wastewater utility?
Solid waste services.
I think it's A.
Or we can,
I know, but that's I always assume that when I get my bill, it's Anchorage Water
I
and
will change that.
Wastewater Utility. And right.
I'll
so
just put AWWU.
Yeah.
That's a good point.
Okay.
Thank you.
Just because that's what people, that's the acronym people see.
It's a good point.
It's going to be, it's the AW, it's the water unit of AWWU. Just put AWWU.
That's a good point. Okay. So fee adjustments. Right now, the Assembly is looking at some adjustments to fees and development services. These are the services that Department of Development Services provides for inspections and reviews and plan review. And so we are assuming that the Assembly is going to be supportive of that, and if they are not, then we will have to adjust this $1.7 million. That is, I think, up for public hearing on the 8th. Revenue exemptions. This committee and the Assembly have been very interested in scrubbing exemptions, and so the budget and so we are doing that. We are building positions inside property appraisal to do those exemptions. Based initially on the work they're doing right now, there will be, in the exemption review, an additional probably $1 to $1.1 million that's not inside the tax cap, because revenue from exemptions in the past, people getting exemptions that they were not eligible for, there will be a reimbursement for that. The other thing that's going to happen that's net of this is we also discovered initially there's a lot of seniors that are not taking advantage of the senior exemption. We're going to let them know that they should be doing that. For the 2020 taxes, it's net. So basically what that means is if these members here are, and we do the review and we find out that Lance is claiming a residential exemption he's not qualified for, I'm going to pay for it in 2020 and yours are going to go down. So in 2020 that reallocation it levels out the fairness. But if I've been cheating the system in 15, 16, and 17, that won't adjust your tax bill in 20. That'll just bring more money in, one-time money, into the budget. Those past exemption revenues will do that. But it's really it's a one-time review exemption for that. It's a one-time hit of money for that, unless they do further exemptions further on. But that's what's going on there. Make sense?
So hang on. So if they continue, how far back have they done the reviews?
They're going to go back 5 or 6 years.
Okay, so if they were to go back even further, would that just come into another year? So
Yep.
Is there, I'm trying to remember the presentation that we had from that gentleman, is there a plan to continue to go further back with the?
They're only going to go 6 years back.
Oh, okay.
Right, they're only going to go 6 years back. I don't think they're going to go 10 years back. I think it's
kind of hard at that point.
yeah, I mean, I think because it's hard to, you get to a point where after 5 or 6 years people relocate. And many of the people, as I understand it, we can get an update, many of the people that are getting the exemption, they're getting a residential exemption and they don't live here. Right? What's going on is that I'm getting the residential exemption and my kids are living in the house. You can't do that. You have to be the primary owner to do that. And so anyway, that's what they're doing. The bed tax, we're having a very good year this year, and our folks in Treasury believe that our bed tax amount is going to go up about $1 million. So we included that. And then we take out revenue sharing. That's the one thing. Again, these are just, this is 7 of the ones that most have an interest in. So that's what's going on with the revenues. So we look at the things that the administration is proposing in the budget, and these are individual line items. But in the public safety arena, the administration is we're proposing a fire academy, about $1.2 million. Fire department anticipates 20 to 25 people leaving the fire department next year, because 20 years ago and 25 years ago, they had huge academies. So they have a lot of people eligible for retirement. So they know that they're going to have a big academy next year, or maybe even the year after that. An APD, that'll be, and that is an attrition academy. That's not a growth academy, but since they're going to have a lot of people leaving, they need more money. Same thing with APD, it's an attrition academy. Dispatchers and evidence. So right now, APD is running a little bit hot on overtime, and it's primarily all in dispatch. And so we know that that's a concern. It's been a concern for at least the last year. That's where their overtime is. So, and there's also some concerns about when people are looking for information on evidence. That's a bit of a lag. So we've got some positions in there. That's about 6 positions. We're looking at, right now, they're costed out at all dispatchers, but they may be 5 dispatchers and an evidence, but the police department will grow by that. The other thing that we've put in here is based on conversations from the Homeless Committee and Public Safety. We're going to add 4 positions, and the primary purpose is they will be police officers who are assigned only to trail patrol. We looked at trail rangers. We looked at the community service contract, whether we have community service patrol do it, whether we have APD do it, or we put people in Parks Department to do that. We decided on putting it in APD because if they run into some issues with concerns about illegal activity or things that need to be enforced, the police officers can do it, parks people can't, park rangers can't, and community service patrol can't. So that's what the plan is there, so we'll add those in.
Madam Chair, can I go back to just the dispatchers? You don't have to change anything. So if you're running overtime at dispatchers, that probably tells me that you are having trouble keeping employees and don't have enough employees to staff your need. That's what I'm kind of intimating if I think about that job, is that you've probably got some turnover issues in there. Those people are overworked. There's an issue going on in there. Yep. So do you have any insight or context for us?
It's mostly, I think, it's lack of the staff, because as we built the force, as we built the patrol, we haven't backed that up with administrative dispatchers and evidence, and so now that's what's happening.
Okay, so just help me understand that, because dispatchers should be determined by call volume, right, not by size of patrol.
So the call volumes are going up because more activities
so
are
really the call volume has gone up, and we haven't grown. We've grown police officers, right, not dispatch. Not that we grew police officers and that caused an issue in dispatch.
Dispatch,
it's
but
the crime issue.
The call volume is going up. And if you know anything about, well, a short thing about dispatches is that everybody in this room who, if they have to call 911, and I hope you don't, but if you do, it goes to APD dispatch. And then if your issue or need is for the fire department, you get transferred to fire dispatch. We're working on figuring out how to figure out how to have one dispatch center so that doesn't happen. But that's a process in play. So housing and homelessness, there will be a position dedicated to behavioral health and health coordinate system. This is basically transitioning from what Nancy Burke does for homelessness, and then we'll be transitioning and supporting that position. That's a half year, that $53,000. The mobile intervention team, that's a combination of the health department and APD. That number was, I think, $500,000 last year, so it's up a little bit. There was an announcement a couple weeks ago from a lot of the nonprofits that want to bring private investment, I think $40 million over a 5 or 8 year period. There's going to be some match requirements to that, so for next year we're looking at providing some matching funds to that service, primarily for shelters. And then the other thing that we've done, and this is related to continuation based on a call from the administration, which is every year the camp cleanup team in Parks and Rec is shown as a one-time cost. We put it in, and then when we go to the next year's budget, it's a one-time, we take it out. And then we put it back in. Then we take it out, and then we put it back in. It's in. It's in for now and forever. So unless in a future administration takes it out, but that adds 14 positions to Parks and Rec, but it's a constant part of the budget right now. And then we talked about property appraisal. 500,000 of that 8 is to keep the system alive. We have a system that basically needs care and feeding for basically doing the property appraisal. 300,000 of that is for 3 positions in property appraisal. That's what that is. Fleet. So in our municipal fleet, we haven't. We need to sort of shore up what's going on in our general obligation fleet, and our fleet's really getting old. We haven't invested in our general fleet, so we're going to beef up the parts. Transit lost a match. They lost a state grant match. I think it's from the Alaska Mental Health Trust. And so in order for them to provide match through paratransit or other services, we're going to backfill that with some matching funds. I think I can't remember the total match on this. I don't think it's as much as is capital. The other thing we're going to do is, for a program, now that SAP is stabilized, we do still have some pay corrections that may go back all the way to the beginning of start of SAP, but what we're going to do is, after 60 days back, if anybody has any payroll, we're going to go back and audit everyone's payroll back to 2017 to make sure that everyone got paid correctly. And so that's It's 3 payroll auditors, that will be their job. So, that's what's going on. Women and infants, children, and then we're going to put some resources into the assembly for interpreters. Brendan, Bab, and the I-team, they're doing a lot of work with nonprofits, with us, and frankly, they are the key to some of the work Property Appraisal's doing and the exemption review. So they have been funded with a Bloomberg grant up until the middle of next year, and then we're going to cover them for the balance of the year. And then we have some staffing for library, implementing the climate action plan, and then there's some other stuff in there that will be in the I won't go into a lot of detail here, but this is basically how the budget is built up. About $310 million of the total $539 million is from property taxes. That includes taxes from the limited road service areas. All of the stuff on the hillside. The orange, the other taxes, that's the amount of money that's inside the tax cap that is not property taxes. So it's gas, marijuana, all variety of other things. And so going around, that's where the money is. Let's see, big ones in there. Contributions and transfers from other funds, that will be part of the trust money in there. Licensing fees, that will be development services, bus fares, current fees. Fines and forfeitures are basically mostly an APD, and then investment income, that's outside the MOI trust.
Lance, where do your intergovernmental charges come from in terms of revenue? Because if you're charging, if departments inside the muni are charging each other, it's revenue neutral, right? And so this has got to be, you're charging somebody outside.
Yeah, it's part, it's a, so the cost, like we're paid for by intergovernmental charges, and I think actually most of that $32 million is coming from the utilities. I'll verify that.
Yeah, I was just wondering, because it's got to be somebody, I would think if it's revenues, it's outside of your core.
I think it's coming from the utilities. I'll verify that. Could you remind me to ask Marilyn that? So this is where the money goes. This is personnel, supplies. It's pretty small. The other services, that's mostly contracts, leases, snow plowing, hauling, anything that we do with contractors. Debt services, bond debt, and then depreciation. Most of that depreciation is SAP. This is a slide that illustrates how the budget is divided based on percent and amount. So 42% of our budget is in police and fire, and then you can kind of dice it out here. When you look at a department's budget, the maintenance and operation department has like an $80 million budget. So debts, you see where it says debt service and maintenance, debt service is at 57, and maintenance and operations at 43 million. When you look at M&O's budget, their budget's like $80 million. But almost all of that 57 million is debt to the road bonds, because they are the ones that are responsible for the maintenance of all of that stuff. So when you look at, someone says, cut $40 million out of maintenance and operations, there's 57 million you can't touch. So when you look at their sheet.
So you're saying eliminate maintenance and operations?
No, I'm not saying that.
No, but you are. If somebody comes along and says cut 40 million and there's 57 you can't touch.
So I think the important part of this slide is that when conversation gets to, why don't we, let's take it's $4 million out of the budget and give it to public safety, and or we have to reduce our budget. You just have to recognize that pretty much everything from the library, the chief fiscal officer, I don't even think that's 10% of the city budget in total. Right, it's pretty close, but we take out debt and depreciation because it's important to see what their direct costs are. This is a hard slide to see, but it's basically the change in body count between 19 and 20. I'll just tell you in summary, there's 9 positions or 10 positions in APD and 14 in Parks and Rec, and a couple scattered, one in the library, but most of them are there. So fund balance. we put this in here because the Assembly is always very interested in the fund balance projections. So fund balance, Jimmy, this probably a new for you, and Carla, you've heard this story before, but for maybe those who, just as a reminder, at the end of each year, after we close the books, we figure out how much money we either have to cover in the remainder of the year or how much money we might have available to add new things to the budget. We don't know that till we close the books, okay? The things that we are looking at in 2019 that we know are going to influence that fund balance, and that unrestricted fund balance is the amount of money either we have to make up by reducing services or finding revenues in 2020 that we haven't already done, or we have to make some adjustments in our revenues. And then when we figure that part out, and that's assuming we've met at our 10 and our 2% to keep our bond rating alive. So anything that we might have available or not, this is a key. This is what we do know right now. We know that the fire department is running hot. We know that due to overtime, some academy costs, and leave cash out, that they're going to be, probably 4% over, or about $4 million. We know, and we're challenging the fire department to narrow that piece down. We're really looking at them to manage the part that they can as it relates to their overtime and some of their expenses. So that number is in flux. It probably could be less, but that's a number that we're keeping an eye on. APD, we know that they're going to be over a little bit, mostly due to overtime and dispatch, but hopefully we've corrected that in this budget here. The over cost for the academy and AFD, we've accommodated that in this budget, so that doesn't occur next year. So we've made the adjustments in 20, seeing what's going on in 19. The earthquake. This is probably the one thing that we are really trying to figure out what's going to happen. When 19 closes, 3 things are going to happen. We're going to know from FEMA what's eligible and when we're going to get it. And it's a big window. It's a big number on what's eligible and when we're going to get it. That could affect our fund balance for 19, but we don't know that yet. Some good news is that right now, outside the police and the fire department, the other departments, they're trending spending less than they have. So basically, they're going to come in underspent, except for police and fire. So that's kind of where they are right now. And then our revenue projections from Treasury as of 19 are looking positive. So we're going to make more money than we did, than we have programmed in 19. Most of it, frankly, is due to the bed tax, because tobacco is going down. That's what's going on there. So we will determine the fund balance in 1Q. That will influence what happens when we make adjustments at the tax cap. The other thing that's going to influence, mostly in general government, that's what's going on there.
Liz, do we tax vaping products in the same way we tax tobacco?
We don't. I don't think we don't. Nope. So on the budget summary, guys, so the overall budget from 1Q to moving forward, we're at about $527 million. We're going to go to about $529 million. So that's the total amount of budget. It's going to go up about $2 million. Now, position count's going up quite a bit, but remember, we're going to add some folks to police, and we're adding all of those folks in parks. That's 25 positions just in those 2 departments. So the property taxes, what we do when we talked about the tax cap, the way the top property taxes works is that when we calculate the tax cap, we look at all of the revenues inside the tax cap, including property taxes. So we look at how motels doing, how tobacco's doing, fuel, marijuana, and we figure out how all those things are, how they're doing, and then that's about $86 million total. The balance that is needed once we calculate that is the amount of property taxes. So if we make more money in those categories, there's less money inside the tax cap, inside the calculations that are property taxes. If those numbers go down and we keep to the tax cap, property tax number goes up. It's all ingredients, but we start with how the non-property tax numbers are doing. So where we'll be is about $3.6 million more in property taxes, and then so the average cost per 100,000 is right now it's projected we rounded it up to, I think, $6 per 100,000, which equates to about $20 for an average house. This is just general government. It doesn't include the conversation that we're going to have in April as it relates to how the school district's going to be managing the bond debt that wasn't reimbursed, which will affect the mill rate, which will affect that. And so we're working with them that as well. So for general government, that will be a number. That number is going to change, but it's roughly between $15 and $20. How are we doing? I'll try to wrap this up. So that's all on the operating side. On the bonds, so in the bond program, the fire department, what we've got here is about $3.8 million. It's a little bit less than they had last year. It's for 4 ambulances. It's replacing 4 ambulances, a ladder truck. We're also going to start the design on a new shop. The shop that the fire department uses is out off of Airport. It's over by Old Station 3 at the end of Merrill Field. It was built in 1984 or 85. The building hasn't got any bigger, and we've added a lot of fire stations since then, and they haven't changed theirs. Really needs a lot of work, so we're going to start getting work on that. Library, it's in 3 primary places. Mountain View, but most of it is to replace some elevators that this was on the bond last year. It did not pass. We have 4 elevators inside the library that were not part of the remodel that were installed in 1986. We can't even get parts for them anymore, so we either got to shut them down or we got to fix them. So that's what's going on there. Maintenance and operations, it's 3 big things, not in any particular order. One of them is the senior centers. We're going to spend about $3 million on the senior centers. It's roofing, it's seismic, it's HVAC, and some parking stuff, both in Anchorage and Eagle River. We're going to spend about $1.3 million on our communication system so that our police and fire and other folks can talk to each other. It's probably the last phase of something we've been working on for 3 years. And then the third piece is in maintenance and operations. While it's in the maintenance and operations department, we are going to propose a bond for APD fleet vehicles. Because we've added to the force, but we haven't added to the fleet. They've been jockeying cars around, and so we're going to make some changes there.
How long does a typical vehicle last?
I think they run them for 7 or 10 years.
And we're going to bond for 20?
And we'll retire the debt in 10.
Okay.
We do the same thing for fire engines. We do the same thing for buses.
Right. If it's 10, that's fine. If it were 20, it'd be like,
No,
oh my
we
God,
don't.
why are we doing this?
No, we don't.
They're 10-year bonds.
Right.
Okay. Thank you.
I mean, I think we issue, I'll talk to bond counsel, we issue 20 and pay them in 10. I don't know exactly how they do that, but honestly, Jonathan, that's how they do that. There's no other way to do that. Well, there is another way to do that, which is what we've been doing, which is we give maintenance and operations $2.3 million to modify all of general government fleet for everybody. They spend $2 million on cop cars. We have $300,000 for graders, dump trucks, street sweepers, pickup trucks, lift trucks for traffic.
By half a loader.
Yeah. So basically, we are falling behind in that because we've been basically trying to keep up with APD.
Remind me to run cookies out to the guy that's plowing my street in a 1987 grader next time.
And we've been, and Alan has been doing a really good job with the graders because he's simplified the fleet into all one type, and we've been getting some great deals and some in a way that we've been doing cooperative purchases. So I mean, they're doing it, but our fleet fund is in a drastic situation that needs to be recovered from. It's not very sexy, but if we don't start addressing that thing, the other equipment that we have on the street, it's really going to be hard to keep up with. So it's a.
Can I ask one question for you, Lynn? So if you, as you mentioned, have to shut down the elevators for the library, wouldn't the library no longer be ADA?
So they have other elevators that are in other parts of the library, but you basically have to go from one place to another. It's not because there were elevators that were updated as part of the remodel, but they have 4 other elevators in there that are in the.
So it would still be ADA?
Yeah, like in the Ann Stevens or in the back room. Yep, they would still be accessible, but yes, yeah, that's also a good point.
Let's have a question. So about the fleet, what's the thought process behind bonding for police vehicles instead of bonding for street maintenance vehicles?
We could do that. We have done that. Correct.
I was just curious, like, do people tend to vote more for cop cars versus, a new plow, or vice versa?
In 6 years, the only thing that we have done in 10 years, we used to bond for general fleet. We used to bond for graders, dump trucks, sweepers, general government fleet. It's been a really long time. I think like 12 years. And so the way we have been doing it, because of financial challenges, is that we put $2 to $3 million in maintenance and operations operating budget. They'll continue to do this. They modify that to a capital program. But if you look, it's like computers. You should have a schedule for changing your technology every 3 to 5 years. You should do that for your fleet. They do the best that they can, but at some point, a 1987 dump truck, it's really kind of hard to. I mean, they're basically keeping the chassis and putting new beds on them. Yeah. The fire department has been in a similar situation. I know that they've been tracking. So what they've been doing is they took a really good idea, is that instead of buying an entire ambulance, what they're doing is they're only buying the chassis and they're keeping the box. So they've been transitioning. The part that wears out is the chassis, engine, frame, and that. They take the box off, buy a new chassis rather than an entire ambulance. So they're on the process. That was their future. Alan and his team have been doing the same thing. Yeah. Parks and Recreation, pretty much the same. Public transportation, this is a match. It's a pretty big number for public transportation, but they have an opportunity up to $12 million in federal money in the coming years that are programmed in the TIP. So, roads and traffic. I think the one project in the road program, and we'll talk about it when we get to capital, but there's one project in the roads. It's Academy Drive, and that's in South Anchorage. Academy Drive connects. Basically, if you drive on Diamond and you go to Abbott, and you go around the corner. When you get to that station, around the corner there's a road that would connect to the Seward Highway. I'll show you on that. But basically, it's a lot of right-of-way. The state of Alaska is improving the Seward Highway south of Diamond, like they've done north. They're just going to keep going to O'Malley. It would include an interchange at 92nd Avenue, which is basically where the ramp is south of Texas Roadhouse, south of,
just one step down from
Scooters.
Scooter.
Yep, it's Scooter is 92nd. Put an but when you go east, there's no improvements. There'll be an interchange, so this is money in there. It's a big piece of that.
Does any of these include like operational costs?
Yes, so when we do roads and parks, in the roads and park bonds, if we add capacity or we add a new link, we put an O&M increment in there. If we're replacing a piece of playground equipment or repaving a 2-lane street, unless we're adding amenities, we do not adjust for O&M. Because it's a 2-lane street, it costs to plow a 2-lane street. But if it's a 2-lane street with a trail and now lights, we got to pay for the lights and plow the trail, we put an O&M increment in there for that in the bonds. So the other thing that's on the bond is a project in Girdwood, and we put this one separately because Girdwood, this would be a $2 million project to rebuild. I think it's their Little Bears and City Hall facility down in Girdwood. It's a $2 million bond that the residents in Girdwood would be paying for that debt on that bond, but it's going to go to the voters, and we are going to have to vote for it too, because it's the full freight to the credit of the municipality. But the language is going to say the folks in Girdwood pay the debt, but since they're in the municipality, we incur. So that would be a separate. So in total, it's about $59 million.
But did you say earlier that is, no, I don't think that this is related to the amount that's actually being retired.
Correct, Jed. This is the amount that we would be, bonding for. Whether or not we issue all of that in 2020 would be depending on how much we're ready to deliver in 2020. Does that make sense? So I've got a last couple slides here, just as a highlight for what's going on in the utilities. The personnel count in each one of the utilities really has not changed. There's really not a lot going on. In the water portion of the utility, The numbers here, actually, I'm probably going to change. When you look at the water utility, you see the amount that their budget is and the amount they're appropriated because we adjust for depreciation. In the past, we've just showed the total amount. I'm inclined, I'll probably change these amounts. But highlights their capital program in AWU is significantly less than next year, in part because they're trying to build their equity. And then, but they are going to give us a dividend, and that's been in the work, but no rate increases. Merrill Field, their budget's about the same. It says no capital improvements, and the reason for that is because they got a huge FAA grant last year, and they're spending on that money, so they have a construction program. They just don't have additional capital revenue coming in, but they're going to be doing work. And then they've been working with the leaseholders, the organization, the assembly. They've made some lease rate adjustments. That take effect, and that's in there. ML&P, no rate increases. Again, no position count changes. When you look at the budget, it looks like we're owning ML&P until it's sold, and that's the way it's presented. The port, really no changes here. Obviously, the cement terminal is a project that they're working on. They got money for it already in the books. It's a capital project they're already working on. Not really a whole lot going on there. And then solid waste services, they have a new plan. They're rebuilding a new transfer station. But one of the things they have before the assembly right now, it's in their proposed budget, are rate increases to their disposal and their refuge. So that's part of our proposed budget as well. One of the things that I like to point out, one of the new performance measures for the solid waste services, and I don't know if it's in the book, is one of their performance measures is a countdown clock for the landfill. Their goal is to slow the clock because basically that landfill was only supposed to last 30 years 40 years ago. And so by managing what goes in and how we recycle and everything that they do, because finding enough land and buying and replacing and expanding that landfill is no cheap expense. So they have a performance measure which basically is to extend the life of that landfill for as long as possible. So Mark Spafford has what's called a countdown clock, and every measure they take to slow that clock is preserving the length of that thing. I think Mark's doing a great job. When he told me he had this idea, that's a great idea, man. And so right now the clock is 39 years. At the current rate at which we're using it, we'll have to find a new landfill.
In 39 years.
In 39 years.
I'll be retired by then.
So, again, this is the administration's really putting money into public safety, the homelessness. We're doing everything we possibly can to address a lot of those issues. I mentioned how we're doing continuation and providing some stability into the budget. And then the capital investments, the sale is ML&P and it's pending. It's got to be balanced. It is balanced. And so this is kind of the schedule we are on. Again, I mentioned the Assembly got the documents yesterday. They'll be formally introduced next Tuesday. Work sessions open to the public. This will be the time when we'll go through every single department. It'll start with police, fire, transit. We'll go into a lot of detail. I'll have the directors there with me. The Assembly can ask a lot of questions. So that will be what's going on there. First public hearing will be on the 1st. And then I think what they've done in the past, we have 5 budget documents. General government, capital, utilities. We have a 6-year fiscal, and then the Anchorage Anchorage Community Development Authority, Andrew Halcro's team. Those are all separate budgets. How the Assembly manages the public hearing. Traditionally, it's they combine them one, speak on any. Then we'll follow up with a little bit of general government on the 25th, and then you can read the rest of it. I think the Assembly calendar is basically, and Desiree can correct me, after the second public hearing, they'll start noodling on amendments they want to make. I know they're already proposing them. I know they're already drafting them. They don't even know what's in the budget, and they're already making amendments. I mean, that's good for them because they're thinking about the things that they want so that we can hopefully work with them in the event that we can incorporate some of them if we have the ability to do it. They'll do a work session on the 15th, and then the Assembly's scheduled to do it then. So that is like the 100,000 foot of 1,500 pages of budget and about $1 billion worth of work. So and we'll go into a lot of detail when we get with them. So, again, Andrew, Jimmy, and Carla, when this thing is polished up and done and we're finished with it, I'll send you guys the following. It's until they give it to the assembly, it's not posted, and this is what we've got because it's a work in progress. But put it together for you guys because hopefully you can help me make it better. If there's something out there the comments that you made will help me make it a little better. But a little bit of dry run helps me make it better. And honestly, Desiree, if there's something that I'm missing that you know they're interested in that I should focus on, it's hard to make sure that because next Friday they got a full agenda, and that'll be all I can do to keep them awake. So I think I'm going to bring dollars, cookies, and rock stars to keep them alive for an hour because
Enough to drink actual rock stars.
yeah, right. So anyway, if you guys have some thoughts, send me, or send it, tell them to me now. But that's kind of what I got in mind. And then the spending limit, and then the thing I want you guys to think about, if I could, Madam Chair, just move along. We're giving it to them now. You're not meeting until the 7th. If you guys want to get together and learn more, the budgets are available online right now. Go to OMB's homepage. All of the documents are available. You can link. They're divided by chapter. Every single piece that you want to do. If you, not to be overwhelmed, but I would encourage you all to at least read the general government budget overview. Okay, it's 15 pages. It's the it's the budget overview in general government. That will give you a really good synopsis of how we transition from 19 to 20. It'll take you maybe 30 minutes. Okay, and it's really simple. For the capital budget, take a look at the CIB. That's 2020. Those are the list of bond projects with descriptions in there. It'll tell you about every single one of those. Take a look at that. Okay. There's a lot of information in there. Don't overwhelm, but if there's pieces or departments that you're interested in, dive in, send us questions, let me know, and then we will get you answers. We'll get you anything that you want. But I would ask you to guys think about getting together, if you're so inclined, after you get a chance to read it, rather than me tell you more about what's in there, tell me what you want to know, and then I'll respond to your questions. Other than that, the other thing I can do is just go into more gory detail, which I'd rather you take a look at it, ask me some hard questions, and we'll figure it out.
So with the work session and the alternative revenue streams that you mentioned, that's next Friday.
Yeah,
Not tomorrow.
correct. Yep.
Oh, okay.
So tomorrow is that. What I'm giving tomorrow is that.
So this is tomorrow at 2.
Tomorrow is you doing this presentation, and then immediately following that, we are doing the revenue proposal.
Correct. My mistake.
Okay.
Oh, okay. So that's
Yeah.
at 3 tomorrow then?
That's at 3.
Okay.
We'll try to make it.
Okay, man. Anyway, that's all I got.
Thank you.
I'm sorry.
Do you want to do a doodle poll?
Downstairs.
Yeah. Yes?
Hello?
Yes?
This is Carla. I thought you said 2 o'clock tomorrow. Was it 3 o'clock?
You're on at 2, and revenue streams is on at 3.
Did you hear that?
Yeah, 2, and then you're on at 2, revenue streams on at 3, and that's in the assembly work session room in 105 or whatever.
155 downstairs for
Yeah, downstairs, Carla.
Thank you.
Yep.
Lila, can we do a doodle poll to see if folks are available for the extra meeting in October? If there are remaining like 4 people here.
We'll send it out.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah. Other than that, motion to adjourn? So moved.
Motion to adjourn.
Okay.